Yesterday, we studied the section on lying. Today, we'll cover the section on sowing discord. Sowing discord can be done either openly or secretly. Openly sowing discord. This tactic is often employed by individuals in positions of authority. It involves creating a rift between two people present by openly informing one that the other has spoken negatively about them behind their back. The instigator then elaborates on what the first person allegedly said or did to harm the second, and may even question why the two are still behaving as if nothing has happened between them. In general, only someone with power and authority can engage in such a negative action. This is because such individuals are not concerned about others' unhappiness, allowing them to openly sow discord. Many such incidents occur in real life. Some Buddhists even view sowing discord as a necessary means of building connections with others, failing to recognize its significant faults. They do not see anything wrong with creating a rift between people. If they have sabotaged others' relationships through sowing discord, or turned people against each other through cunning means, they will not only face difficulties in this life, but may also be reborn in the hell realms in the next life, with little chance of escape. The collection of writings about the 6 paramitas states, through sowing discord, one causes a rift among close family and friends. Through cunning methods, one incites individuals to hold grudges against each other. Then one will fall into the hell realms and will never have the chance to escape. Therefore, it is important to carefully and thoroughly reflect on the principle of cause and effect, and assess whether our thoughts and actions align with this principle. If they do not, we will inevitably encounter various forms of suffering. For instance, when humans act against the laws of nature, such as by destroying forests, the balance of the 4 elements in the material world is disrupted, leading to frequent disasters. Similarly, if we fail to align our actions, speech, and thoughts with the principle of cause and effect, we will undoubtedly face the corresponding karmic consequences of our negative actions. Some individuals become excessively arrogant when given a small amount of authority, neglecting the negative impact of creating a rift between two people. This is highly problematic. Those who believe in the principle of cause and effect should seriously reflect on the adverse repercussions of such behavior. Secretly sowing discord. This involves driving a wedge between two people who have a good relationship by secretly approaching one of them to share false or exaggerated claims about negative things the other person, whom they care for deeply, has allegedly said. Those who secretly sow discord do not dare to openly speak ill of others. Instead, they sabotage the relationships of two people by talking behind their backs. This behavior is truly harmful. When interacting with others, whether they are Dharma friends or worldly acquaintances, it is best to express our true thoughts and opinions directly. Even if they do not accept our words, we can feel at ease knowing that we are being genuine and sincere. Therefore, if we have an issue with someone, it is better to address it directly rather than gossip behind their back. Some individuals may seem to get along well with everyone, but in reality, they create trouble by sowing discord behind others' backs. This may stem from habitual tendencies or a lack of mindfulness. Humans are complex social beings, each with different dispositions, motivations, and karmic influences. As a result, it is inevitable that we may not always get along with others. However, there is no need to intentionally sow discord. The most severe form of sowing discord is inciting conflict between Sangha members. The Masasaka Vinaya states, when the Sangha gathers together in harmony and joy, the harmony often brings calm and peace. Those who cause conflict among members of the Sangha will suffer in the hell realms for 1 kalpa. It also states, when the Sangha gathers in harmony and joy, the harmony often brings calm and peace. Those who unite the discordant members of the Sangha will experience joy for 1 kalpa, as celestial beings. It is now impossible to truly commit the wrongdoing of causing conflict between members of the Sangha, as this specific wrongdoing refers to the act of creating discord among Sangha members during the time of the historic Buddha Shakyamuni. However, sowing discord and causing conflict among Sangha members, Dharma masters, or Dharma fellows still carries severe negative consequences. If we have the capability, we should strive to unite people in working together for the Dharma and for the benefit of all living beings. Engaging in pointless arguments over individual or exclusive group benefits serves no purpose. It is particularly serious to create a rift between a Vajra teacher and their disciples, or within the community of Vajra brothers and sisters. Some people are disciples of the same guru, yet they cannot get along with each other, much like fire and water. Once a Rinpoche's attendant told me, lay practitioners A and B may not be on good terms. I asked why, and he replied, because when one comes here, the other will leave immediately. In the terminology of Buddhist logic, these two lay practitioners are incompatible or irreconcilable, just like water and fire and darkness and light, in that when one appears, the other cannot remain. It is truly unfortunate if two Vajra fellows are like this. I heard that two well-known masters of a monastery also had a similar conflict. Whenever there was a meeting or gathering, if one master attended, the other would be absent. Of course, this information is purely hearsay, and I am unsure if it is true. If it turns out to be false, then it is merely baseless slander from others. However, if it is indeed true, it suggests that the masters are not behaving appropriately, regardless of their status. As Dharma friends, if they refuse to engage in conversation with one another, how will they treat an adversary? How will they help those individuals who have no connection to them, as a true Mahayanist would? This is definitely worth reflecting upon. Let's return to the text. Regarding the faults of secretly sowing discord, there is a relevant story in the Century of Noble Deeds. Once, there was a man who was covered with sores soon after his birth, and no medicine could cure him. Because he wailed every day and lived a painful life, he was named Wail. As he grew up, he still bore the terrible sores. Day and night, he cried out in anguish. A neighbor heard him and said, "How pitiful you are." It is said that somewhere in a monastery, there is a Buddha who can heal all our physical and mental ailments. He is the great king of medicine in this world. So why not seek a cure from the Buddha? Upon hearing this, Wail went to see the Buddha with immense joy. Upon witnessing the Buddha's majestic and dignified appearance, he couldn't help but feel joy and admiration. The Buddha taught him the Dharma, and his sores were healed instantly. Later, Wail took ordination and practiced the Dharma with great diligence. Soon, he attained arhathood. The monks asked the Buddha, why did Wail have to experience such karmic consequences? The Buddha replied, in one of his countless past lives, there were two wealthy men in a kingdom, A and B, who harbored deep resentment and often clashed with each other. One day, the rich man A presented the king with a large number of jewels and said, B is a malicious man who often schemes to harm me, so I hope your majesty can punish this wicked person. Without verifying the truth, the king believed A's words and arrested B, subjecting him to brutal torture. As a result, B was left covered in wounds. Later, B's family bailed him out, allowing him to finally return home. From this experience, B developed significant disenchantment with samsara. Consequently, he chose to practice in seclusion and ultimately attained the realization of a pratyeka Buddha. He then recognized the equality of friends and foes. Concerned that A would be reborn in hell due to the harm inflicted upon B, he went to visit A and displayed various miraculous signs. Upon witnessing these signs, A felt a profound sense of reverence and expressed genuine remorse for his past wrongdoings in B's presence. The Buddha told the Sangha, "The rich man who sowed discord in front of the king is whale in this life." So, as Buddhists, we shouldn't just talk the talk. Instead, we should walk the talk and strive to transform our minds. Each of us should reflect on whether we have secretly sown discord in our lives. If the answer is yes, we should contemplate the potential karmic effects that may manifest in the future. In fact, if we haven't purified all of our negative actions, it is certain that we will experience the karmic consequences. This is akin to planting a seed. If the seed is not destroyed, it will inevitably sprout and eventually bear fruit. Therefore, we must reflect on our own lives, and if we have committed such negative actions, we must repent. Otherwise, the karmic effects of sowing discord are quite severe. The Sutra of Verses on the Sixth Destiny states, "If one enjoys sowing discord, quarreling, and getting angry, one will be reborn as a human-eating demon with an ugly face." The Sutra of the Compendium of Essential Teaching states, "Those who sow discord will suffer negative karmic effects. They will fall into the hell realm and constantly be burned by fire, which will cause them great pain." Thus, those who sow discord will be reborn in the hungry ghost or hell realms. This may not concern those who do not believe in the principle of cause and effect, as such individuals are indifferent to karmic retribution. However, those who do believe in this principle will be mindful of their speech and strive to nurture harmony among people through their words. For example, whenever you encounter interpersonal conflicts, whether between two Dharma masters, a guru and a disciple, two non-Buddhists, or even two tribes, you should do your utmost to act as a mediator and restore harmony. It is worth investing time and resources in this endeavor. As you may know, it is greatly meritorious to bring people together in harmony, a topic that will soon be discussed in the teaching of the aspiration to be reborn in the pure realm of Sukhavati. It is a meaningful pursuit if you can find a way to resolve others' interpersonal misunderstandings and conflicts. In fact, when two individuals have a strained relationship, it can often be discerned from their expressions and attitudes. If someone's name is mentioned and the other person displays a peculiar expression, it may indicate interpersonal conflict between the two. I am skilled at making such observations when needed. Although I do occasionally make mistakes, I am accurate about 90% of the time. Currently, many people lack integrity. On the surface, they appear amiable toward one another, but they engage in gossip behind others' backs. Here is a verse from the Mahaparinirvana Sutra that I particularly like. Don't harm qualified teachers. Stay away from evil friends and family members. Always speak words of harmony. Then one can be reborn in the Buddha field called immovable. I hope you can behave in this manner over the long term. Specifically, do not harm any qualified teachers. Do not go along with negative companions to prevent adopting their bad habits, and strive to speak words of compassion, gentleness, and harmony with others. In summary, we must be mindful of our words. Sometimes two people have a good relationship, but it can easily be damaged by the careless words of a third party. Conversely, some individuals can help others maintain harmony. Perhaps this is because they have already cultivated bodhicitta in their minds. Just a few phrases from them can be incredibly persuasive and may even inspire others to naturally develop compassion. In fact, it leads to significant problems if a person constantly thinks about sowing discord. If we have ever caused conflicts between two individuals, we must genuinely repent for this negative action and vow never to do it again. Harsh speech involves making offensive comments about others' physical imperfections, such as openly labeling them as one-eyed, deaf, blind, and similar terms. Some people use derogatory terms like cripple, short, big, flat-nosed, big-eared, skinny, fat, and so on, to refer to others based on their appearance. While this may seem like a specific manner of expression, such hurtful language leads to significant karmic consequences. The Sutra of the Wise and the Foolish contains a story about a monk named Filled with Honey, which illustrates the terrible consequences of harsh speech. At the time of Buddha Shakyamuni, a monk named Filled with Honey attained arhathood very quickly. Ananda asked the Buddha what Filled with Honey had done in his previous life to achieve such rapid realization. It turned out that once, while the Buddha was on his alms round, he met a monkey. The monkey offered honey to the Buddha. When the Buddha accepted the offering, the monkey was so happy that it jumped up and down. However, it accidentally fell into a deep pit and died. The monkey was then reborn as a human, who became the monk Filled with Honey. Ananda then asked, why was he a monkey in a previous life? The Buddha replied, at the time of Buddha Kassapa, he was a young bhikkhu. He once saw an arhat leaping across a river and laughed at the arhat, saying the arhat jumped like a monkey. Because of this misdeed of harsh speech, he was reborn as a monkey for the next 500 lives. Thus, we should not only refrain from commenting on others' physical defects, but we must also avoid mocking others by saying they resemble a monkey, yak, dog, pig, and so on. Engaging in such harsh speech will lead to significant consequences. When teaching the 37 practices of Bodhisattvas, the 17th Karmapa, Ogyen Trinley Dorje, shared a similar story. In a past life, during the time of Buddha Kassapa, Dusum Khenpa, 1110 to 1193, the first Karmapa, once insulted a monk by telling him that his face resembled that of a monkey. As a result of this negative action, he was reborn as a monkey for the next 500 lives. Later, when he was reincarnated as Dusum Khenpa, his face still resembled that of a monkey. Before becoming a monk, he had a girlfriend who ended their relationship due to his unattractive looks. This breakup prompted him to renounce worldly pursuits, and he made a vow to be good-looking in his next life. Otherwise, it would be challenging for him to approach and guide sentient beings. As it turned out, Dusum Khenpa was the last of these monkey-faced lives. There are online comments suggesting that the majesty exuded by the 16th and 17th Karmapas is a result of this vow made in a previous life. Many people, both Buddhists and non-Buddhists alike, are preoccupied with their physical appearance. If you are not good-looking, there may not be much you can do about it in this life. If you are determined to change your looks, you may need to undergo plastic surgery, which can be expensive. Sometimes, a few $1,000s may not be sufficient for the procedure. Therefore, you might consider making a vow to improve your appearance in the next life. It is said that the 16th Karmapa had a very majestic appearance, so when he was in the United States, many followers were drawn to him because of this. Harsh speech is a negative action related to our words, yet it can directly impact our physical bodies and adversely affect many aspects of our future lifetimes. Therefore, with everyone we encounter in this lifetime, we should discipline ourselves with mindfulness and vigilance, refraining from speaking harshly to them. Sakya Pandita says, "Do not say harsh words to harm others, not even to your enemies. Just like echoes in a valley, the insult to others will immediately return to you." Therefore, we must be cautious about using harsh words. Some Buddhists disregard this, despite having studied the Dharma. I'm not sure if it's due to karmic influences from past lives or other reasons. They listen to the teachings as if they were mere news, and fail to internalize them. Studying the Dharma in this manner yields few advantages. Harsh speech also includes exposing others' hidden shortcomings and engaging in offensive talk of all kinds. Thus, we must refrain from saying anything that makes others unhappy. The Sutra of the Great Heap of Jewels states, "Do not criticize others' faults. Do not expose others' wrongdoings. Abstain from coarse speech and stinginess. Such a person will attain liberation." Some words may be spoken sweetly rather than harshly, yet they can still make others unhappy or uncomfortable. These words are still considered harsh speech. A Tibetan saying goes, "There is no much or little for harsh speech. There is no cheap or expensive for joyful food." No matter how harshly one speaks, if it upsets others, the speech is not good. No matter how cheap or expensive the food one offers is, as long as it conveys good intentions, the food is good. Some people have the ability to make others happy for a long time with their words. They may say a simple sentence, but the listener will never forget it. That sentence can bring great benefits to the listener's life. Those who frequently speak with gentleness and softness will undoubtedly be reborn in the celestial realms. The Sutra of the Right Mindfulness of Dharma states, "Harsh words break a kind heart, so wise people abandon them. Those who often speak gentle words will be reborn in the celestial realm." Some great masters often speak with remarkable skill. They rarely upset anyone, and whatever they say tends to make others happy. In contrast, some individuals are not like this. They would be better off remaining silent, as their words often disturb others. They frequently find themselves distressed, wondering, "What negative actions did I commit in my previous life? Why do my words always create problems?" As you can see, while humans may appear similar, their levels of inner compassion and communication skills vary. If you want to learn communication skills, you may refer to Buddhist scriptures such as the Just King, the Flower Ornament Sutra, and the Lotus Sutra. In summary, as long as you are compassionate and altruistic, your words will undoubtedly bring direct or indirect benefits to your listeners. Even if you are scolding others with harsh language, you may still benefit them, as your words may help eradicate the negative seeds in their mind stream, preventing them from reverting to their former bad habits. Therefore, regardless of our words, inner compassion is essential. Using offensive language in the presence of one's guru, a Dharma peer, or a sublime being is particularly serious. If your words cause the guru to appear unhappy, cease their Dharma activities, or even enter parinirvana, the one who speaks disrespectfully creates significant faults. Thus, no matter to whom we are speaking, we must be mindful of our words. In today's society, many people seem unable to control their speech. Whenever there is an opportunity, they speak carelessly, which is not good. We should guide our speech with mindfulness and vigilance, say what should be said, and refrain from saying what should not be said. When attending a meeting, some individuals choose to remain silent and simply sit there, which is not ideal. Conversely, there are others who cannot seem to stop talking and end up disrupting the discussion, which is equally undesirable. In fact, effective communication relies on language, so it is important for us to develop proper speaking skills. Worthless chatter refers to speaking at length without any meaningful intent, such as reciting what one imagines to be Dharma, but is not, like the rituals of brahmins, or engaging in pointless discussions that provoke desire or anger, such as sharing stories about prostitutes, singing lustful songs, or glorifying theft and violence. In today's society, worthless chatter is ubiquitous, permeating TV shows, films, the internet, newspapers, magazines, and so forth, where a significant portion of the content is essentially meaningless. People not only listen to and believe in this worthless chatter, but also engage in it themselves. This external environment poses challenges for individuals who aim to practice the Dharma. If someone wishes to engage in Dharma practice, they will undoubtedly encounter various difficulties and obstacles. While one may manage to overcome these obstacles for a day or two, the question remains, when will they truly transcend and transform these challenges? Therefore, I often think that the pith instructions from Vajrayana are particularly well suited for people in modern society. This is because Vajrayana teachings often embrace a more open-minded approach and offer extraordinary methods to help us transform our thoughts and actions onto the spiritual path. In contrast, other types of precepts, especially the pratimoksha precepts, are becoming increasingly challenging for practitioners in today's world to observe. This can sometimes be observed in our everyday lives. How many Buddhists actually engage in virtuous deeds such as chanting mantras, helping others, and meditating? Not many. Instead, many people spend their time watching TV programs and films or chatting online every day. This world itself is already an illusion. What they pursue further illusions within this illusory world. Apart from greed and hatred, they hardly gain anything of value from the TV programs and films they watch. By examining what occupies most people's minds and the state of today's society, it becomes clear how our mental intake is connected to the status of the external world. Today's media is saturated with information that promotes greed and anger, covering topics such as military affairs, business, and more. What we are exposed to runs contrary to the conducive conditions needed for the pursuit of liberation. When practitioners encounter these influences, it becomes challenging to resist temptation. Eventually, some may even abandon their Dharma practice and stray further from the right path. The Sutra of the Right Mindfulness of Dharma states, "Much worthless chatter can disturb and confuse one's mind, destroy one's pure conduct as a practitioner, and impede one's path to nirvana." In addition to worthless worldly chatter, I must remind you to refrain from irrelevant and distracting talk when others are reciting prayers, chanting mantras, and meditating. Otherwise, you will disrupt others' accumulation of merit through their virtuous actions, which is a serious mistake. This is why I reprimanded some lay practitioners in yesterday's class. If you do not wish to listen to the teachings, that is fine. However, if you disturb many other Dharma listeners, it is truly detrimental. This also applies to those who receive teachings through audio and video. For instance, if more than 20 Dharma friends are listening to a teaching together, and everyone is attentively focused on the Dharma, one person's talk can disturb the entire group and hinder everyone's merit accumulation. Therefore, if you are unable to remain silent, it is quite harmful to both yourself and others. The Sutra of the Compendium of Essential Teachings states, "The doors of hundreds of merits are destroyed by tongues." The popular collection of traditional Chinese wise sayings also states, "Illnesses enter through the mouth, troubles come out through the mouth." Some individuals seem to lack self-control and enjoy talking incessantly, even during a Dharma class or a group mantra recitation. While they may not wish to engage in virtuous acts, those around them still seek to participate in practice and should not be disturbed. Specifically, it appears that some lay people do not know how to properly listen to Dharma teachings. Despite having attended teachings for many years, their behavior in a Dharma class remains inappropriate. In fact, it would be better for these individuals to withdraw from the class, as their absence would be acceptable. However, if they stay and disrupt others, it will create obstacles to their Dharma practice in this life and in future lives. Moreover, many works by novelists, screenwriters, and authors are filled with trivial chatter. There are artists, singers, and movie stars who captivate millions with their works of worthless chatter. These works prevent their audiences from engaging in something meaningful. At times, when we carefully observe this world filled with delusions, we must acknowledge the herd mentality of humans. However, as Dharma practitioners, when we gain a bit of wisdom from the Dharma, we can begin to examine the world through the microscope of Buddhism. This enables us to easily recognize the bacteria of meaningless things, such as worthless chatter. People today enjoy engaging in all sorts of worthless chatter, which seems to come out naturally and spontaneously. Upon careful reflection, you can realize that much of this worthless chatter is driven by greed or hatred. Furthermore, the severity of the fault is proportional to the level of attachment or hatred generated in your own mind or in the minds of others. For example, after reading a novel, someone might say to others, "I read a novel today featuring a woman who is incredibly beautiful." Due to their eloquence, many may develop desires. Similarly, after watching a film, someone might persuade others by saying, "There was a war between our country and another. Our troops fought in this manner." Upon hearing the story, various reactions arise among people. Some feel anger and hatred, while others are misled and display foolishness. There are also those who praise themselves and belittle others, believing their side to be exceptionally powerful, thus fostering arrogance. Consequently, many afflictions stem from listening to others' worthless chatter. As you know, afflictions such as greed, hatred, and ignorance lead to negative karma. If these afflictions arise from your worthless speech, then undoubtedly your speech is flawed. On the other hand, by studying the Dharma together, which helps eradicate our defilements of greed, hatred, and ignorance, the merit of our speech is incredible. Why do I teach every day, even if it's a short class? It's because during my teaching, I cannot engage in discussions that provoke afflictions, and the Dharma in my teachings can eliminate our defilements. As you listen to the Dharma class, the likelihood of harboring unwholesome thoughts decreases, and even a fleeting moment of freedom from afflictions is in itself a merit. Very often, people complain that listening to Dharma teachings is too tiring. However, studying the Dharma is very necessary. Even if we only listen to one Dharma lesson, the benefits we receive from it are significantly different compared to listening to a lesson on worldly knowledge. Why is that? It's because the Dharma can directly or indirectly antidote afflictions. Therefore, listening to Dharma teachings is crucial for us. Many Dharma practitioners read Buddhist texts and listen to 1 or 2 lessons every day. This habit is genuinely beneficial. If you are unable to hear, contemplate, and meditate on the Dharma, you can still recite verses and aspiration prayers from Buddhist scriptures or those written by esteemed masters that are full of blessing power, as suggested by Mipham Rinpoche. Even if you are unable to do that, you can still chant auspicious mantras such as the mantra of Avalokiteshvara, the mantra of Padmasambhava, the mantra of Vajrasattva, and similar ones, which should not be difficult. In any case, we should reduce idle talk and devote more time to chanting mantras. About a year ago, an elderly practitioner made a vow in front of me to recite the mantra of Avalokiteshvara 100 million times. Today, I met him again at the entrance of the Dharma hall. He can hardly hear, but he kept holding my hand, asking for my blessing. He said that even if he could live for just another year or so, he could complete the recitation. He practices diligently and only sleeps a little at night. He has managed to recite the mantra over 50 million times in a year and a half. He can finish the remaining 40 million and more in just over a year. Such an elderly practitioner is truly remarkable. If you engage in idle or unrelated chatter while saying prayers or reciting mantras, it will render your efforts ineffective, regardless of how many times you repeat them. In this regard, the great Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche did not oppose reading or discussing the Dharma while reciting prayers or mantras, unlike some other gurus who prohibited it. When I was young, I was dedicated to studying the Dharma, so I would read a book and occasionally engage in discussions about Dharma questions while chanting mantras. This is particularly relevant to the various types of gossip that spread among the rows of the assembled Sangha. A single individual who spreads rumors can undermine the merit of an entire congregation and nullify the virtuous deeds of its supporters and donors. Therefore, good practitioners rarely engage in idle gossip. The record of the exalted acts of Buddhist monastics introduced Chan Master Datong of the Song dynasty, who always remained solemn and upright, and whose eyes always gazed ahead, whether he was practicing or resting. It was said that he never engaged in frivolous talk and refrained from laughter for 30 years while he was leading the Sangha. Maybe he was like Longri Tongpa. As you can see, those who possess wisdom and states of realization typically do not speak nonsense, whereas those who do not practice well are especially inclined toward trivial worldly chatter. In ancient India, it was customary for only those who had achieved the highest spiritual accomplishments and were free from any detrimental flaws to use funds donated to the Sangha. The Buddha strictly prohibited anyone else from doing so. However, in modern times, individuals learn 1 or 2 tantric rituals, and as soon as they can recite them, begin to accept and use any potentially harmful offerings they can obtain. Without having received the necessary empowerments, without upholding all the samayas, without mastering the generation and completion stages, and without fulfilling the requirements of mantra recitation, to seek offerings by performing tantric rituals, merely chanting mantras superficially, like Bonpo sorcerers, constitutes a grave transgression. In both the Han areas and the Tibetan region, a practitioner who intends to use the funds donated to the Sangha must at least have upheld pure precepts and must consistently guide their mind stream with mindfulness and vigilance. The precious garland of precepts states, "Only those who study and practice the Dharma on the foundation of pure precepts are entitled to use the offerings of the faithful." Using these dangerous offerings is akin to swallowing red-hot iron pills. Unless one possesses the cast iron jaws of the union of generation and perfection stages, ordinary individuals will burn themselves and be utterly destroyed. As the saying goes, dangerous offerings are like deadly sharp blades. Partake of them, and they will sever the vital artery of liberation. Therefore, it creates serious faults if a practitioner uses donations without first attaining genuine states of realization. The Buddha speaks of unprecedented causes and conditions Sutra says, "It's better to cut off one's own flesh to feed oneself than to receive others' offerings with evil intentions." Some individuals are far from mastering the generation and perfection stages of meditation. While they may be familiar with the ritual's words, they don't even make an effort to recite them correctly. To make matters worse, as soon as they reach the mantra recitation, the most crucial part, they begin chatting, unleashing a torrent of irrelevant gossip, filled with desire and aggression, wasting the entire allotted time. For example, such a person might recite the mantra of Vajrasattva, Om Vajrasattva Hum, 3 or 4 times, and then start chatting with those sitting next to them, saying, "Hey, how have you been? Have you received money from home?" This is disastrous for themselves and others. During the Song dynasty, Chan Master An resided in Qingtai Temple. One day, while in a meditative state, he observed 2 monks engaged in conversation while leaning against a railing. Initially, celestial guards surrounded them and listened attentively. However, the celestial guards eventually departed and were replaced by demons. In the end, the demons began to spit on the monks, curse them, and even erase their footprints. Upon emerging from his meditative state, Chan Master An inquired about the monks' conversation. They revealed that they had initially been discussing the Dharma, but then transitioned to idle gossip. Eventually, they began discussing the donations made by their patrons, which even disappointed the demons. It is most important for monastics to abandon this kind of chatter and focus entirely on reciting their mantras without engaging in conversation. Lay practitioners should also strive to recite mantras and avoid worthless chatter. The Sutra of Accepting the 10 Good Karmas as Precepts states, if one can avoid worthless chatter, one's mouth can often emit a pleasant aroma, resembling that of a Utpala lotus, and one will be born in a place where a Buddha appears. Therefore, we should strive to avoid worthless chatter, focus on reciting mantras, and speak words that are beneficial to all living beings.